Is your business protected against cyber crimes? Well, we have everything you need to know right here on the Leadership Voice. Welcome to the Leadership Voice. I'm your host, Jay Barbuto. Today's show is about cyber insurance. Joining us today are Chris Wessels of IQ Risk Insurances and John Young, CEO of Neutralize AI. We also have a great leadership lesson being delivered by Professor Xing Qi. We have a lot to talk about, so let's get things started with today's quote of the day. Today's quote came from Kevin Mitnick, security consultant and world-renowned cyber hacker. Companies spend millions of dollars on firewalls and secure access devices, and it's money wasted because none of these measures address the weakest link in the security chain, the people who use, administer, and operate computer systems. Our first guest today is Chris Wessels. Chris has transitioned from a fitness coaching background to become the broker for IQ Risk Insurances, a cyber insurance company specializing in protecting against cyber crimes. As is necessitated by this industry, Chris is well-versed in the intricacies of cyber insurance and its vital role in protecting business assets. His mission is clear: to empower business owners with the knowledge and resources they need to navigate the digital age safely, while preserving their operations and futures. Please welcome to the show, Chris Wessels.
Thanks for having me.
Chris, it's great to have you on the show. We're going to talk a little bit about cyber insurance. So maybe we could start, could you tell us about your company, IQ Risk Insurances?
Absolutely. So IQ Risk was founded about 20 years ago by Nikki Tran. And coming from that fitness background, I decided to transition into insurance. I felt like it was a great opportunity for me to learn more about businesses and to get really connected within the business space. We've decided to take a cyber insurance approach, as this was a newer type of policy offered in the early 2000s. We've seen a lot of crimes, attacks, and things like that happen in recent years. So it's completely necessary to make sure that your business is protected. And we're trying to make sure that happens.
Now, we all know about home insurance and car insurance, but now companies, businesses, they're investing in cyber insurance.
Yes.
And we're seeing it much more than ever before.
Absolutely.
So what are hackers actually stealing?
Everything that business owners want to grow. Things like their finances, revenue, their reputation. They want to take things that we as business owners are trying to enhance. So if that can provide them more money, more security, that's exactly what they're going to go for.
And so what are the actual risks to companies?
Sure. So in terms of risk to companies, the hackers are trying to hit you from all different angles. One of the most common risks that I'm seeing nowadays are email phishing. So I'll see an email that looks like it's coming from Jay or coming from a coworker, and maybe just that last letter on their email address is changed a little differently. So it looks like it's a valid email, but hackers are going in using AI and things like that to make sure that that looks as real as possible so that you are providing information for them that they're searching for.
So if we were to think like a hacker, what has value to a hacker?
Sure. Yeah, I think getting in contact with CEOs, top-level executives, they want to get directly to the source, and they're trying to essentially trick the source. So if they came to me and they said, they posed an email threat, for example, and I were to click on it, we'll say phishing, and they took that information from me, then that immediately starts the downhill process from a cyber attack.
And so when a company gets hacked, there's like costs, and it's not just the ransom.
Yeah.
So how do you place a value on these types of crimes?
Sure. So it depends on a lot of different factors. No matter how many employees you have, if they stole employee information, you would have to pay to retrieve all of that information. The time that it takes to contact all of those employees or clients costs money. Ransom, as you mentioned, is a really common one. But in order to get back that data that was stolen or recover the systems, that's going to be a high cost. And it really does depend on number of employees, how difficult it is to get that information back. Another common one is called business interruption insurance. So if a hacker hacked our company and we were down for 10 days, we would need to pay all of the employees, all of the lost business during that time. So that's another form of payment that we would have to come up with from the insurance companies.
And so when we think about the cost or the loss,
Sure.
when we're talking about cyber crimes, it goes far beyond what happens on the surface. The actual assessment of the value starts to become a much more complex calculation.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us, what are some of the categories of cyber crimes?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, email phishing is one of the top cyber crimes that we're seeing. It's so easy nowadays to get access to people's emails. There's companies out there that people pay thousands of dollars for in order to retrieve people's email addresses. So it's easier than ever to get that initial touch. So email phishing is one. I think it's around 35% of the hacks, the claims that come in are from that. From there, they'll start to take money. So we'll see ransomware attacks. They're asking for money in return for the damages that they've done. Malware is another type of attack where they're going to hack into the computer systems. They're going to change some things up. They're not allowing you to operate your business properly. I would say those are three of the more common ones.
Okay.
Yeah.
So tell us about cyber insurance. So how does that actually work for a company? Like, if a company thinks maybe I need to invest in this, how does it work from there?
Sure. So like any other insurance policy, you will fill out an application. So with general liability, with workers' compensation, they're asking specific questions to assess the risk for those liabilities. For cyber insurance, these carriers are doing the exact same thing. They're going to look at your business, have you fill out questions in terms of number of employees, what types of services are you provided. Nowadays, if you are providing any type of online services, that will increase potentially the value of the premium, increase the risk at hand. So these insurance carriers want to know how much risk is out there, and they want to make sure that they are also protecting themselves. And the last thing I'll note is these companies are also trying to see how much data protection you have. So if you hire an outsourced IT company or a cybersecurity company to protect your business assets, that's also going to provide just a more value to you as a business and less risk in that case.
So obviously, when we're talking about cyber insurance, there's a product, there's a service, there's a protection, there's a decision that companies have to make. So what are some of the categories of protection or the coverages that we see companies needing to be considering? Like, what are the options that companies would have to make decisions about?
So I think it's important from a business owner perspective to look at your company and understand, are you vulnerable? Are you at risk? And the short answer is yes, everybody is, but to what extent? As I mentioned before, if you are doing a lot of online sales and services, if you're keeping a lot of online information, whether that's company information or client information, typically you are going to be more vulnerable. So you need to assess how much risk you have and also speak to somebody like myself who is in the cyber insurance space to make that assessment with you and talk that through.
And so what are some of those things? What are some of the things that a company might get protection against?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the things like email phishing, ransomware, that all has to be paid by somebody. So if you are protected for those things, then you will be able to work with the carriers to get that paid back. However, most people, a lot of companies do not have the cyber insurance policies, and so they don't have the coverage. So who's going to pay for that? That's going to come out of the business owner's pocket. And as you mentioned earlier in the show, that's a lot of money. We're seeing millions of dollars being taken from companies.
And do companies have to get certain endorsements to get certain coverages, like certain categories of crimes?
Sure.
Or is it just you're covered, but at a certain value?
That's a great question. So one thing that I'd like to note is a lot of policies offer packages. So for example, as a restaurant owner, you could add on a cyber liability to that package, cyber liability coverage to that package. The problem is you have to read the terms. Are there any exclusions from that policy? What are the limits? You might have cyber attached to that, but do you have enough? Are your coverage limits enough? So I think if you do have it right now, it's so important to check and understand if something were to happen, am I properly covered and is it enough?
So what happens when there is a cyber attack?
Mm-hmm.
I'm covered,
Yeah.
I have insurance, and something happens. What's the next? What happens when we actually know we had an attack?
Let the carrier know as soon as possible. So these carriers also work with third-party cyber security companies, data recovery centers, and as soon as you let them know, they're going to get to work. So you're telling them what happened to you, what happened to the company. They're immediately going in and assessing, this is what we need to clean up. This is where we need to take the direction. So they work with third parties to make sure that you will be protected once something does happen.
Are you seeing any trends with different companies or different industries maybe being more amenable to taking out cyber insurance?
Mm-hmm.
Are there certain industries that are locked in to cyber insurance more than others?
Sure. Yeah. Any industry that is doing a lot of online holding of information, of client information especially, they're going to be more vulnerable. So if they're doing sales online, if they're selling products or services online, they're very susceptible. They're passing credit card information, bank account information while they're making these transactions. Another one that has been more common is the healthcare space. There's a lot of money within healthcare, but there's also quite a bit of vulnerability there as well.
Okay, so next I want us to talk a little bit about maybe companies that either maybe underestimate things or maybe just make mistakes. But what mistakes have you seen companies make when it comes to maybe undercoverage or maybe just not having cyber coverage?
The biggest mistake I'm seeing is email phishing. And the company could be perfectly covered. They could have the correct securities to make sure that they're not getting attacked from other angles. But they also have to address this with their employees often. As a reminder, even myself, just a couple weeks ago, I received a message from a lawyer friend of mine, the same exact email, but it looked a little off. And so I reached out to that person and said, hey, I got this email from you. It looks a little weird. And he said, hey, don't open that, please. I've already contacted somebody. They've sent out thousands of emails under my email address. So this is happening all the time. And as I mentioned before, it's much easier to gain access to people's personal information. So it's really crucial for business owners, executives to quickly share this, be responsive and say, hey, watch out for this stuff. And if it doesn't look right, ask a third party, ask that person directly before you make any decisions.
So I think a lot of people probably, if they look in their email inboxes, there's probably a lot more attempted crimes than we maybe originally estimated. That it's actually something that's very commonly attempts are being made. Well, Chris, I want to thank you for being on the show. We're going to have you back here in just a little while for the panel discussion along with John Young.
Okay.
Sounds great?
Awesome.
It's now time for a featured segment of the Leadership Voice. It's today's Did You Know? Today's Did You Know comes from IBM.com. The average reported ransom payment in 2022 exceeded $800,000. However, the global average cost of cyber attacks is $4.5 million per incident, which is up 15% over the past 3 years. If this is daunting, perhaps your company will join the already 51% that plan to increase their cyber insurance investment this coming year. It's now time for today's Leadership Countdown. Today's countdown comes from the Federal Trade Commission. We bring you 5 things your cyber insurance policy must cover. Number 5, terrorist acts. Number 4, global cyber attacks. Number 3, cyber attacks to your IT network. Number 2, cyber attacks on your data held by vendors and third parties. And the number 1 coverage you need most in cyber insurance policies is data breaches involving theft of personal information. Don't go anywhere. We have John Young in the studio right after we learn how the Giles O'Malley Center for Leadership is bringing learning to your work. The Bringing Learning to Work program is our way of connecting the faculty of Cal State Fullerton with the business community of Orange County and Southern California. We have over 72 training programs that are available via distance or face-to-face. And the faculty come to your company and they deliver the training to your employees.
The Bringing Learning to Work program is really fundamentally, it's leadership programming. We do diversity and emotional intelligence training. We partner with Cal State Fullerton because they had subject matter experts in these fields. And we're really fortunate and privileged to be able to do that.
Many companies can't afford training and development personnel. And so this is a great opportunity to leverage Cal State's faculty to help them develop their learning programs.
The leadership of the center and the students allow me to not only bring leadership development to my company, but allow me to interact with some amazing students who have grit, potential, and just amazing futures in front of them, and I get to take part of that. It's a wonderful feeling.
When your organization is ready to develop its talent, reach out to the Center for Leadership and we'll help get you there. Welcome back to the Leadership Voice. Our next guest is John Young. John Young is CEO of Neutralize AI, a cyber defense consulting organization based in Southern California. John started out on the wrong side of the law when, as a teenager, he hacked into the AT&T phone system for years until the FBI scared him straight, thus starting his 40-year career in cybersecurity. In 1987, Young became the network director of the $41.8 billion C-17 program at McDonnell Douglas. And 30 years later, he retired from IBM's cloud division to start Neutralize AI. John's personal mission is to help businesses prevent cybersecurity breaches. He's an author, speaker, and has appeared on several TV and radio programs as an internationally recognized cybersecurity expert. Please welcome to the show, good friend, John Young.
Thank you, Jay, for that wonderful introduction. And I'd rather be nowhere else than here today because I know we're going to help a lot of business owners that are watching this program.
This is a great opportunity for them to get really tuned in to this very important topic, which is cyber insurance and how companies can protect themselves. Could you tell us a little bit about your career and how you interface with cyber insurance?
Well, I've been doing this, as you said, for a long time. FBI scared me right into a 40-year career. A day does not go by where some business owner asks for my advice about cyber insurance. It's on everybody's lips and it's on everybody's mind what they should do to protect themselves.
So could you give us an overview about cyber insurance from a company's perspective?
It depends on the company. Some view it as overhead, that it's like liability insurance, physical liability in case someone trips over the door jamb. They have to have a liability. It's not like that at all. The difference between just regular liability and cyber insurance liability is that if there's a data breach, it can bring the whole company down. 6 out of 10 small to medium businesses that have been breached can go out of business.
So some company owners might underestimate the real loss that could happen if cyber crimes find their way into their business.
That's absolutely true, especially with startups too, because they're focused on growth. So they want to put everything into marketing and sales to bring in that kind of revenue. So they're always looking to cut costs. So in the past, the odds of being breached were very small, I would say. It was almost non-existent when I first came into this business. Now, every single company can expect to be attacked. There's no safety in numbers. Being a big company, that doesn't matter. Small company, it doesn't matter. I compare it to jewelry robberies. There's a smash and grab where they just run in very crudely and grab the jewelry after smashing the case. That's what these single hackers will do to a small business. Then you've got the Ocean's 11 type rings that will plan out burglary type heists for months. And with cyber break-ins, it'll be very sophisticated, very extensive. They'll do a lot of research. They'll use social engineering, and everyone will be super highly educated, especially in the Eastern European countries. I've worked with so many people that had master's degrees and PhDs that are making almost no money so that they can find a lot of alternatives in crime to make this money. And it's not really a crime if your country is against the United States. You're almost a hero if you can break into some kind of disruptive element for our country.
So this industry has really taken off, hasn't it?
It's taken off, but this is an industry that's in its infancy. Comparing it now to what it's going to be in 10 years, people are going to look back and say, wow, I wish I had cyber insurance 10 years ago, because it'll be harder to get it. The requirements are going to be very, very stiff. A lot of insurance companies jumped right in and they found out that they could lose money and have backed out. It's almost like here in California, a lot of companies are backing out of home insurance because of the fires and all the big payouts they have. Well, when companies get hit with cyber insurance payouts, they become shy about just giving the insurance to anybody. And then on the other hand, if you were required to get cyber insurance because you're working for the government, or even you're in a building, like in my office building where I had my office, they required that $1 million of liability insurance. In a few years, they're going to require that you have cyber insurance to be a tenant, just because they don't want you going out of business and affecting their space. So the fact is, in 10 years, 20 years, I can't even picture how big this industry is. It could be in the hundreds of billions.
So insurance is always about reducing risk of catastrophic losses. Is there anything a company can do to eliminate all risk and make them completely impenetrable?
No. There's no way to do that, because compliance isn't a sprint. It's a marathon. A company can have the best cybersecurity posture today, but then tomorrow they could be out of compliance because they didn't update some of their computers. There's an exploit that is a vulnerability that hackers will take advantage of. So it's an ongoing battle. I've heard about military grade cyber security and zero trust, of course, but those are only really like labels. And to get to that point that you'll never be breached, that's pretty much an impossibility, I would say, because you could count on just being hacked over and over and over again.
And so even with the very best people, even with the most talented individuals, with the best security consultants, there's still going to be risk, no matter what steps you take.
Yeah, that's a big part of cybersecurity is risk and governance and compliance, because that's where people like me come in to make sure that there's policies and processes and procedures that ensure that this can be replicated over and over and over again, that you're not just compliant for the minute, you're compliant over the course of the company's life. And it's getting harder and harder because of changes in technology. And I have a saying, Jay, that you've heard of necessity is the mother of invention. Well, I say that desperation is the father of necessity. And the reason I say that is so many people turned to crime in the cyber world during COVID. And they had nothing to bring in money. So they were able to buy off the dark web kits to be able to infiltrate companies. And you talk about ransomware. For people to understand what ransomware is, just imagine that the company's records are kept in a chest, like a treasure chest. Well, the hacker will come in and he will lock all those records in this chest. And to get those back, you have to pay the hacker to get the key to open that chest to get your records back. So that's basically what ransomware is all about.
You know, you mentioned with the COVID experience, with so many businesses turning to online work and work from home situations, that must have created an amazing amount of, I'm going to use the word risk or exposure to maybe unsecure work.
Absolutely. Well, you can imagine people are working from home and they leave to go make themselves lunch, and their 17-year-old kid gets on the computer and starts doing internet searches or going to sites they shouldn't be going to. Suddenly, it's getting logged in the company's log files that the employee is going to some of these sites, or the individual that's not authorized could go to a site, pull down some malware by accident because they haven't been trained to avoid that, and they could compromise their parents' computers, and then suddenly it could go through the whole enterprise of the network. So there's challenges through working from home that have never been seen before. At IBM, I worked from home for literally the last 13 or 14 years of my career because I had managed 40 offices worldwide. It didn't matter where I was at. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of things that come up that people who aren't trained in IT operations really can fall into these traps.
Can you share an example of maybe call it a warning sign for other companies? Could you share a tragedy that may have that you've seen in industries where companies haven't protected themselves and it cost them?
Yes, I can do that. And this is from personal knowledge of the health industry. Picture a doctor who's got a nice practice. He's been in business for 40 years. He wants to keep practicing for 5-6 more years. But there's a ransomware situation, and the doctor doesn't have cyber insurance. Suddenly, that's an out-of-pocket expense to pay the hacker to unlock their customer records. The doctor has to make a decision. Are they going to pay out of pocket hundreds of thousands of dollars to this hacker? Or are they going to fold up their practice and just call it a day and retire? And in this case, they folded up their practice and just said, that's it. But that's not where it ends, because when you talk about customer records, right? HIPAA is about patient records and their safety. A doctor will have all the medical records of a patient. Out of a simple breach for anyone in the healthcare industry, that can cascade into legal repercussions where they're getting sued by their patients, or there's a class action against them because of the fact that this has gone out. Plus, they can also face penalties from HIPAA and the government organizations because they violated their basically their oath to protect the customer records. So there's a lot that goes into especially medical records. But that's a tragedy that not just affects the doctor. Can you imagine going to your doctor and it's closed? You know, you didn't bother to open the mail, or you haven't been there for a while, and now you've got to find another doctor. And some of these doctors and dentists too, I've seen it happen to dentists, they have thousands and thousands and thousands of patients, and every one of them has a Social Security number. And the Social Security number is the holy grail for a hacker, because from that, you can create a brand new identity, buy houses, boats, cars, get credit. So suddenly the tragedy goes downstream and affects all of the patients whose identities have been stolen. And they're in a major hassle. I know of a person right now that's just beyond consoling, because they're in that kind of situation where everywhere they turn, their credit is ruined.
So even with our very best efforts, there's going to be risk. And so many companies, I think over 51% of companies are investing in cyber insurance. So how should companies vet insurance companies? How do you choose the right insurance company for cyber insurance?
Well, as you said, this is a kind of a new industry, right? Which means there's a lot of companies that are popping up. And I've gone through a lot of them, and it seems to me the best thing about them is their marketing ability, because they're landing clients. The fact is, if a company takes the cheapest option without really vetting the insurance company, learning a lot about them, and then also they need to learn what their responsibility is. They have to bring in someone like me who can analyze what their cybersecurity posture is, we call it, so that when they do get data breached, the company that's holding the policy doesn't say, you didn't satisfy the requirements of what we expected you to do. So we're not going to pay you off. And it winds up in court, which is happening more and more often these days.
So companies, even with insurance, are expected to do their part in maintaining a secure network and maintaining security in their information.
Absolutely. I'll tell you how much it's changed in the last few years. A while back, and not too long ago, the insurance company would send the policy holding candidate a checklist that they would fill out on their own, and they would send it back to the insurance company, and they would be granted a cyber policy. Those days are over now. No insurance company is just going to send you a checklist. And in fact, for your viewers, if they are doing business with someone like that, that's not actually going there and talking to them, and the policy holder has to actually be vetted by the company that's providing the policy. So it's a two-way street as far as that goes. So if they sort of have a company that's saying, don't worry about it, and they provide a very cheap insurance, you'll find when there is a data breach that it's not going to be something that you can fall back on and actually get paid.
Yeah. So what advice would you offer a company executive who maybe minimizes the importance of cyber insurance?
That's a great question. My advice is their job could depend on the cyber insurance policy that their company has. And as I had said, 6 out of 10 companies go out of business when there is a data breach. And how often are attacks happening? Just for an example, the last statistics showed there was 30,000 websites that are getting hacked daily. Sounds like a lot. That's impossible. No, it's not. There's 2 billion domains out there right now, and it's growing every day. So you could hack 100,000 websites a day and still not even scratch the amount of domains that are out there. So for any executives out there that think this is just overhead and it's just another thing that they should keep to a total minimum, they may find that their company can really suffer. And when there is a data breach, the one thing that happens is the financial bottom line of the company is affected. When a financial bottom line is affected, what happens? Budget cuts, and a lot of time that means reduced headcount.
So, I mean, the bottom line is CEOs, cyber insurance, cyber security, your life, your career might depend on that decision.
Absolutely. And if it's a health organization, then patients' lives can actually depend on it. A study by a healthcare journal found that over 1,200 patients died because they had to be taken to different hospitals, or their hospital had the emergency room shut down after a cyber attack. So we're getting to the point that there's a lot of deaths that are actually occurring that people aren't aware of just because of this hacking. And these hackers are ruthless. They are not good people. I see there's a lot of glamorization of them in the movies. They are not someone to glamorize. And in fact, that is the worst decision that someone can get into, is to try to become a hacker. Because just look at it this way. You're in a successful organization. You get $2 million with a few other guys. And we see what happens in the movies when a successful bank job's pulled off, right? Suddenly they're killing each other because they said, oh, he didn't do that much, or I want more of a bigger share. Well, the same thing is happening with a lot of these hacking groups because they're just glorified gangs. And so I implore people, stay out of the hacking business, because a lot of repercussions can not only happen from the law, but also from the people that you're working with, because you're not working with the best people.
All right. Well, thank you, John. I want to thank you for being on the show. And you'll stick around so that we can, we're going to bring Chris back and we're going to do a panel discussion.
Happy to do it.
It's now time for our leadership example. Today's leadership example comes from HeimdallSecurity.com. We bring you the 5 biggest confirmed ransomware payouts of all time. It's now time for today's leadership lesson. Today's leadership lesson will be delivered by Professor Xing Qi.
Hello, business leaders. I'm Xing Qi, and this is today's leadership lesson, which is about cyber insurance. Nowadays, business organizations of all sizes, from big multinational corporations to small local mom-and-pop stores, are using technology in their business operations. As technology evolves and it becomes more and more intricate, the associated cyber security risk intensifies. In the past couple years, cyber attacks, especially data breaches, have become way too common. These cyber attacks not only damage business organizations' information systems and their reputation, but also put their customers and employees at risk. Consequently, it is imperative for every business to equip themselves with a cyber risk management plan. Cyber insurance is an insurance product that can help protect a business against the losses resulting from a cyber attack. It emerged in the late 1990s as a result of the growing reliance on technology and the increase of cyber threats. The cyber insurance protection includes first-party coverage, third-party coverage, or both. The first-party coverage protects the data, including the employee and customer information. It covers the costs such as legal counsel, data recovery and replacement, customer notification, lost income, public relations and crisis management, cyber extortion, costs for cyber attack investigations, regulatory fines, etc. The third-party coverage protects a business from liability if a third party files claims. It covers the costs such as payments to affected customers, claims and settlement expenses, losses arising from defamation and copyright infringement, costs for litigation, etc. There is no standard cyber insurance policy that fits every business. To make sure the coverage is appropriate and adequate, a business leader can directly contact the insurance companies that offer cyber insurance. The largest cyber insurance providers in the market include Chubb, Fairfax Financial, AXA XL, Tokyo Marine, AIG, Travelers, Beazley, CNA, Arch, and access capital, to name a few. Alternatively, the business leader can hire an experienced insurance agent or insurance broker who can help find the best insurance providers and the policies that fit the needs of the business. I'm Xinqi. This has been today's leadership lesson.
Welcome back to the Leadership Voice. We've brought back our two guests, John and Chris. Thanks again for coming back to join us for our leadership panel.
Absolutely. It's good to be here.
So the way this works is I'm going to ask 4 questions. You'll each have a chance to answer each question. Chris will answer the first question first, and then John, you'll have a chance to comment afterwards, and then we'll switch for each question. So our first question is for Chris. When it comes to cyber insurance, what do many executives underestimate?
I think many executives think they're covered, especially when they already have a policy in place. They sign the policy, they make the payment, and they think they're good to go. They don't think they're vulnerable at that point. They think the payouts are going to be there if something were to happen, and they get comfortable, even a little complacent at times. And so I think it's really important to constantly update the systems, have the communication with the carriers, with your insurance broker to make sure that you do have the proper coverage and you will be taken care of if something were to happen. So,
if a company doesn't do those things, are they at risk of having their claims denied?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because they sign the policy and they might not know what they're actually signing for. It says cyber liability on their policy, but not all cyber liability policies are made the same. Carriers vary. There's different exclusions that you have to watch out for. So it's really important to take a deep dive in what am I actually covered for and making sure that that's something that is worth paying for.
John, same question. What do you see many executives underestimate?
They underestimate the abilities of their IT operations to handle cybersecurity. When they tell me our IT operations are great, then I know that they are vulnerable because there's not any emphasis on cybersecurity. A good company will keep them separate. You'll have IT operations, then they'd have a team led by someone like me that will monitor and help IT do the patching, make sure their account is correct and the privileges are right, and they're doing their backups, and they're following the policies, processes, and procedures. Then there is also an auditing arm that audits me and my cybersecurity team monitoring IT. So that's one thing they underestimate. The other thing they all underestimate, and I've seen this, is the damage that gets done. It's like they don't realize there's legal problems that can come out of it. There's more than just the bottom line. There's customer loss because their reputation has been hit. There's a real market share for the big company drops of sometimes $1 billion, $2 billion, like the pharmacy company that got hit. So it can really have a snowball effect that they only see the ransomware hacking and the amount, and that's a small fraction of it.
So when we hear about data breaches, when we get a letter from a company that says we're letting you know that there's been a data breach, please check your accounts and things like that, that means that there's been a cyber crime more than likely, right?
Absolutely means there was a cyber crime.
So that's the signal. So it really is happening more than some people even realize.
Yeah, I've gotten 5 of those letters myself.
So that's terrific. So well, that's not terrific, but that's a good information. So our second question, John will answer first. So let's talk about the future of cyber crimes. What does the future hold, John?
It depends how far out you want me to go. I can go out pretty far because I wish I would be around to see quantum computing and the networks that will interface with AI, which is a beautiful thing as far as it's going to help in so many ways. But there's also a lot of dangers with AI. And one of the things with quantum computers is our current encryption can't stand up to the force of a quantum computer. Google had announced that their computer had solved a problem in 7 minutes that would take a supercomputer over 150 years to solve a mathematical problem. So that just shows the leagues of magnitude that we're talking about in the future. So you can imagine that hackers are going to have these tools at their disposal maybe in the future for a fraction of what they are to do the R&D and the development on it.
So there are those that are trying to infiltrate our data are working maybe in many ways even harder than the people that are trying to protect us from it.
They do, but the funny thing is they're one-trick ponies. They do the same thing over and over again because they have an unlimited audience, and they can just keep moving on and on. Someone in my field, we have to learn every type of exploit. We have to stem all of the 1,000 ways that these guys can get in. So someone may be an expert on ransomware. Another one could be an expert on social engineering. Another one could be an expert on exploiting updates on systems. So they can do the same things over and over and over again and still do well. But the final point is, if these guys were actually spending the same amount of time in school, they could become a doctor, or they could be like you, a professor, PhD. And instead, they're going to this life of crime because they think it's easy money. It's not.
Okay. Thank you. So, Chris, same question for you. What do you see as the future of cyber crimes?
Well, I see in the cyber insurance space difficulty obtaining cyber liability insurance, price increase. Absolutely. That's almost guaranteed. There's going to be a lot more crimes happening, especially as we've moved on from the pandemic in 2020. That has encouraged a lot of people to work from home, work online. There's more exposure there. So there's going to be increase of prices. There's going to be difficulty of obtaining it. So I would absolutely recommend all business owners should be looking into it as soon as possible.
All right. So our next question, Chris is going to go first. How did the pandemic alter the landscape of cyber insurance?
Changed it completely. I mean, cyber insurance is fairly new. Early 2000s is when it really started hitting the market. And with the pandemic, as I just mentioned, everybody started to go online. People weren't going in person. They were moving all of their resources to online. That means it was easier for them to email somebody than to walk across the office and ask them. So there was a lot more data and information being passed. So the vulnerabilities were certainly much higher during and post-pandemic, even today in 2023.
What about you, John? How has the pandemic altered the landscape of cyber insurance?
If you compare it to regular crimes like homicides and burglaries, can you imagine in your neighborhood if those crimes, murders and homicides tripled in 1 year? Well, that's what happened with the pandemic and cyber crimes. Interpol and Scotland Yard and the FBI saw an explosion of cyber crimes from people who were desperate that would never have turned to crime, but they had no source of income and they decided, I'm going to take the risk. And that's where they jumped in.
So thank you both. So it's actually now time for a featured segment of our panel discussion, which is the final word. For the final word, the way this works is that each of you will have an opportunity to share one final pearl of wisdom or piece of advice to our audience. And John, you'll go first.
My pearl of wisdom is, if you're a business owner, you needed cyber insurance yesterday, okay? But don't just take the word of a neighbor or somebody who's referring you. You've got to do your own vetting and your own legwork and really go through it, because opinions are like birthdays. Everybody's got one, right? So you might get an opinion from just someone who's your neighbor off the cuff. They don't even know what they're talking about. So you got to go to a professional. You've got to really look through a few of them and then make a decision based on that.
Okay. What about you, Chris? One final pearl of wisdom or piece of advice.
I think it's extremely important for owners, executives to talk to their employees about these things. I saw a statistic that over 70% of cyber hacks are happening to companies between 10 and 10,000 employees, which is probably the majority of the US population in terms of business owners. So it's really crucial for owners to share what's happening, to not be oblivious to the facts, and to share things like this to their employees, to let them know, watch out, be careful, and always seek a third party if you feel uncomfortable about something.
And there you have it, our final word. John and Chris, I want to thank you both for joining us on today's show and sharing your thoughts and experiences around this very important topic.
Thanks, Jay.
Thank you, Jay. It's a pleasure.
If you have a question or need advice, connect with us by email, leadership@fullerton.edu, or on Instagram @CSUF_CFL. Thank you for tuning in to today's show, where we discussed everything you need to know about cyber insurance. Thanks to our featured guests, Chris Wessels and John Young, for sharing their expertise on this timely topic. Also, a special thanks to Professor Xing Qi for delivering today's leadership lesson. Join us each episode of Leadership Voice, where business executives can learn from experts in the field. I'm Jay Barbuto here at the Giles O'Malley Center for Leadership at Cal State Fullerton, and we'll see you next time right here on the Leadership Voice.